Hello everyone. Welcome to our Wednesday with Wing. I think we'll probably give it a couple more minutes to see who else turns up. We've got over 40 people that have signed up for it, so we'll just wait a few more minutes to see if anyone else comes along. Brilliant. I can see people coming in now, thick and fast. Okay, I think we might as well get ready. So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our Wednesday with Wing. So this month we have a very exciting and special event lined up. It's on our topic, heating up the conversation, communicating geothermal. And we're going to dive into the critical role of communication in advancing the geothermal industry. So for context, across the sector, particularly in the UK, awareness of geothermal remains a significant challenge. And personally, I think one of our greatest challenges. And government, policymakers, investors, end users, local authorities, and they often sort of lack the necessary understanding of what geothermal means. So it means that us as an industry are starting from a position of advocacy. And today I'm absolutely thrilled to introduce our expert panel on communication. We have Anne Morell, who's the CEO of UK Geopower, Anne-Marie Wilkinson, Senior Advisor at Montfort, Pam Wilson, Head of International Media Relations at Big Partnerships, Boel Steer, Regional Marketing Director for Europe at Baseload Capital. And these remarkable leaders and women will help to equip us today with actionable strategies to elevate geothermal in conversations at all levels. It's something we can all do to help that we can ensure that this powerful and sustainable energy source gets the recognition it deserves and really does become part of the UK's energy mix. So just some housekeeping on how today is going to run. Each of our speakers will deliver their talks and introduce themselves. Then we'll have a panel discussion exploring key themes amongst us. And then finally, it's over to you. And we really do encourage audience participation at this time because let's face it, communication is a two-way street. So at the end, you'll have the option to pop on your cameras and have a chat after the talks. So if you feel comfortable, it would be great for you to turn your cameras on and get the conversation rolling at the end of the panel session. So I'm really honoured to be hosting this event, and I really want to extend a heartfelt thank you to our incredible panelists and everyone who made this discussion possible. Your time and expertise are hugely appreciated, and I can't wait to kick things off today. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Anne Morell, exploring why communication is going to be fundamental to geothermal success. Over to you.
Thanks very much, Lucy. Hello, everybody. Great to be with you today. So I'm going to keep my section very brief because we have three excellent experts in the room, and I'm just kind of setting the context a little for today, and also to explain, I suppose, my geothermal comms journey, as they say, why I, not as a comms professional, am so passionate about spreading the word about geothermal. So I don't need to explain to anybody in the room why I'm passionate about geothermal energy. We all are. It's just so amazing, so many benefits, so many opportunities are with us from geothermal. So it's such a shame and such a waste that not more people in the UK know about this amazing energy source. And as Lucy said, this isn't just the general public who lack this awareness, but also influential decision makers, including in the energy space. My background is in deep geothermal in Bavaria, and over there, when you're talking about renewable energy, you very quickly speak about, of course, wind and solar, but geothermal is almost just as obvious to people in Bavaria as the other renewable energy sources. And that is my personal mission for the UK. I'd love us to get into the same position that geothermal is a key part of the energy mix and a key part of the conversation. So we need to get the message out there, as Lucy said. It's my mission, and I think a lot of you in this room, I can see a lot of names, I recognise a lot of you share this mission. And and many of you are doing a lot already in this space. This webinar is a great opportunity to start to pool our experience, to learn together, and to work out how, through collaboration, we can make the voice of geothermal even louder in the communities around us and in our networks. I know Wing is doing loads of work in this already, and the community around Wing, and I'm really grateful that we've had this opportunity of using this webinar as a platform for our collaboration, for our joint learning, and to make geothermal's voice louder. So, as Lucy said, our aim for today is to share quick wins in the field of communication. We have some experts in the room who will help us learn and potentially revise. We're keeping this quite high level, so you may know a lot of what's said already, but it's great to be able to think about these practical actions that we can all implement immediately to amplify the geothermal message. And also, as Lucy said, it'd be great at the end of the session to hear from you, to hear about your experiences, your learnings, and how we can share and work on that together. So it's pretty high level. We only have an hour, even though all of us have got enough to speak for a whole day. But we just want to start the discussion, start this collaboration, and it's about raising awareness generally about geothermal. So very quickly about why I'm here as a non-comms professional talking about this. I'm not an expert in this field, but I was a project developer in Bavaria for many years. And so I've done a lot of external engagement at many levels, making mistakes, but also enjoying successes in that area, mainly because I had some excellent experts around me and my colleagues were very good in this area to help us get the message out. I must admit, when I started in geothermal, I was a little skeptical about the importance of general awareness raising and PR, as I saw it for geothermal. My background is finance. I started as a CFO. And for me, in my head, of course, the spreadsheets worked. Technically, it made sense. Geothermal made sense. Financially, geothermal made sense. So I was thinking, if we show people that, then they'll enable geothermal with us. But of course, you can do so much more if you communicate more effectively. I was quickly converted from my skepticism because I witnessed the power of effective communication in enabling geothermal. My geothermal colleagues back in the day were brilliant at explaining the geothermal opportunity in language and using images, which didn't just educate our stakeholders, but also excited the audience. And in many cases, the audience didn't just accept geothermal, but because they were communicating so effectively, they got excited by geothermal. And this created demand. Of course, if people want something and the demand is there, then the supply happens, geothermal happens quickly and at scale because it fulfills that demand. And we were able to raise this demand with householders, business owners, town councils, investors and government. And creating the demand all started with very effective communication. I personally had to learn this from scratch. As I said, I came from a finance background, but I love doing it. Really interesting. I'm still learning, particularly about social media, and I hope our colleagues will be talking a little bit about that today and how we can effectively communicate. But this explains, I suppose, my experience and why I see geothermal communication as being so important. But the final point that I'd like to say before I hand over to the experts is I really enjoy this side of our work as well. We are so lucky that the sector we're in is so sexy and so exciting, and the stories we can tell are so powerful because we can have direct impact on people's lives. So I really enjoy it. I hope you enjoy it today. And I look forward to the session, look forward to hearing from our experts in the room and also, as I said, from you in the audience. Thanks very much, and back to Lucy.
Great, thank you very much for that. For the next talk, we are moving on to Anne-Marie. Was it your go next? I apologize.
I think Boel's going to share. I think we're going to share the video, Lucy. I think that's the plan next for the starting point. Yeah.
Great, thank you. I will just get that up. It should be in my Dropbox now. We're having a couple of difficulties with the with technology, but we will be there in 2 seconds. Okay, so I have the video. please let me know if you can see and hear this. See.
We can see it for sure. Not sure we can hear.
Okie dokie.
And just let me say, this is all my fault. I was laughing a little bit being presented as a communications expert, and for most of you, we were meeting in this room where you meet the organizers before entering the real webinar, and I couldn't hear anything. I couldn't make myself heard. I was the total non-expert, and also I was supposed to hand over this video that nobody can show right now. So I'll be happy to share all my tips and tricks, but I'm not the expert about everything. This video anyhow that we wanted to show you, it's from Baseload Capital where I work, and my colleague Gabriella, she went out and hit the streets of Stockholm one day just to ask, random people she met if they knew what geothermal energy was. And she asked that question to a lot of people. Most of them said no. And when she asked the question the other way around, can you please say 3 sources of renewable energy? People said, yeah, that would be wind, solar, and tidal, perhaps? Or they said, that's hydro, that's wind. What's the third one? No, I can't think of it. So that's basically the content of that video we wanted to show.
I think I've got it. If you would like to share it still.
Sure.
I've just signed up to Dropbox. Ready? No, apologies. I thought I had it there. Sorry.
No worries. I've learned over the years that showing a video is difficult in an online meeting, not only because the picture can be a bit, get stuck, and also because the sound doesn't always work. I think we're brave to try it at least. Would you like me to present myself and start talking a little bit? Is it my turn? Thank you so much.
I think let's go on to that.
Yeah, sorry about that. Hi, everyone. I'm really honored to be here. Thanks so much for inviting me. My name is Boel Stier. I work for Baseload Capital. And we're a company investing in geothermal energy and also actually developing geothermal energy. We're based in Sweden, and we don't have any power plants there. We have our power plants. They are still quite small pilot plants in the US, Iceland, Japan, and Taiwan. And I have this very long title saying basically I'm responsible for marketing and communication and also public affairs in the area of Europe. And the reason I'm here is to talk about communication. And why do we need to talk about that? Well, I am so proud to be part of this community since 2 years back. I know way too little about geothermal energy, and I'm learning new things each day. But communication is important, and we need it because we need to scale. I think we all agree on that. Geothermal energy is an enormous opportunity, and most people, decision makers out there, they don't know what it is. That's why we wanted to show you the video, right? And I think it's good for us to remind ourselves that it is that way. It's easy to get the impression that, well, now that everyone's in my LinkedIn feed are talking about geothermal energy, then probably everybody knows what it is. But no, if you enter the streets in, I would say, any city around the world, except perhaps in Reykjavik, Iceland, and a few other places, people do not know what geothermal is. And for us to scale, we need awareness. Otherwise, we won't be able to influence decision makers, policy makers, and we won't get. We also need the public to understand the potential. And What I've understood, one important insight after many decades working as a communications expert. I don't know if you ever become an expert, but you collect expertise and experience. I've realized that we usually want to say too much when we try to communicate. And us being in the geothermal energy, we can fall in love with things. It might be a certain angle that we work with or the full diversity of geothermal energy. But if we are to reach people out there, it has to be very, very simple. And it has to always start with the people we want to reach. It does not start with what we think or what we think. It's about those other guys, those who we want to reach. And I want to tell you very quickly a story. So my manager, Kristina Hagström-Miljeska, who some of you might have met, she was a while ago, I think it was a year or two ago, in Washington at the Hill, or at the Hill, in the Hill. I don't know the exact phrasing of that, but meeting the decision makers in the US. And she met this congresswoman that, she said, well, now you're here and you're representing geothermal energy. Yes, Christina and the other persons who were with her said, yeah, we just met another group from the geothermal industry. Oh, really? Christina said. And this person who was actually friendly towards us and wanted to help us, she said, well, you have to come together. You have to unite and have one unified message. And instead of trying to persuade us with the, technological details, you have to tell us policymakers things like geothermal energy helps keep American families safe and warm, things like that. So that was an important insight. And after that, I know that Christina and other people at Baseload Capital, Geothermal Rising, the geothermal NGO in the US, with the help of a lot of other people, came together and organized a few workshops at a series of conferences to try to do something about it, basically trying to unite the industry, the geothermal industry, around to tackle this problem, to unite around a clear, common, joint message that we can all agree on. Because even if we might be competitors sometimes for a concession or for a contract, that's fine. That's the way, a market should work. We need to be unified when educating the public and policymakers and all the other people out there that we need to reach. So there's this initiative called the Declaration of Communication. It's a call to action for exactly that, for us in the geothermal industry to unite. And if you go to geothermaldoc.com, a web address, geothermaldoc.com, I'll write it in the chat soon, you can sign this call to action. If you agree with this, of course. And then you will get a little marketing kit that we've prepared so you can inspire others to sign. Today we have around 250 signatories and we need at least 750 more to be strong enough to take the next steps together. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Beryl, and it'd be good to have that link in the chat. I think it's a really great initiative to just bring the whole industry together and have that united message. And the great thing is it's global, and I think that's really particularly powerful. Okay, next we have Pam Wilson. Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me here today. I probably know the least about geothermal in the room, and what I know mainly is the enthusiasm and passion that this sector has through meeting with Anne a couple of times, who came in to discuss potentially working together on some communication plans and strategies to support the projects that she's involved in. So yeah, I was a little bit nervous about joining today, but you know, I know communications and that side of it. And like the other ladies on the call today, I think you've got those tools, you can apply them across any sector and any topic. And it is about understanding who your audience is and how you use the language to interpret the language in a way that it will resonate with them and get their passion going for it as well. So a bit about me. I'm Head of International Media Relations here at BIG. The business is celebrating its 25-year anniversary next month. We're an integrated comms agency and we deliver results around the world for our clients. I've been with BIG for 12 years. Before that, I was a radio producer for 17 years, so I'm much more comfortable way behind the scenes, not actually in front of the microphone. The last 7 years of my career doing that, I worked at Radio 2, producing some of the most well-loved programmes there, which was great fun. Nowadays, I work with a variety of companies across the energy mix, including vessel operators, technology businesses, service companies, and engineering consultancies. And my role involves managing their global press strategies, shaping content and key messages, and getting them that important coverage that will support their reputation and objectives across different markets around the world. I'm also part of BIG's senior ER media advisory team. We support our clients in the event of any incidents or crisis situations, and sometimes that's keeping them out of the press, which is a completely different kettle of fish. So today I just really wanted to kind of help share some tips to how to make technical messages less technical and therefore how to make them stick. So as we know, energy is a very complex industry, and whether it's geothermal, wind, hydrogen or CCUS, most of the time the biggest challenge isn't the technology, it's the communication. So here are a few practical ways to make those messages stick in person and on social media. So I think the best way to put it, when I first met Anne-Marie, she put it a good way. She said, it's a kitchen table test. If the person across from you doesn't understand what you do by the time your coffee's cold, you're overcomplicating it. And that's it. We need to elevator pitch things without dumbing them down, just that simplification of the message. So I would recommend that you start with the why. What does geothermal or whatever technology you're working on, what does it actually do for people? Similar to what Boel was saying. So instead of saying it's a closed loop binary cycle system, which I don't know what that is, you could say it's a way to turn underground heat into clean, reliable energy, or it's a giant radiator underneath your feet. Relatable language will win every single time. Similar, you know, the megawatt base load, no one knows what that means, but they would get always on clean electricity that doesn't depend on the weather. Storytelling beats specs every time also. So share a moment. Tell people that there's a town in Iceland where all the homes are heated with just underground heat, or personalise it with my work helps power schools and hospitals with clean, quiet energy. So getting the word out, what do we actually do? Let's take everyday communications and conversations first. Prepare a simple 1 minute, what I do and why it matters pitch. This is always great to have for whether you're in a supermarket queue and you bump into somebody and they ask you what you're up to these days, or if you're at a conference or a family gathering, you see that auntie or uncle you've not seen since you were a kid. Ask questions first also. So have you heard of geothermal? And then tailor your answer. You know, get an idea of how much information the person you're speaking to actually knows or understands about it. And when someone says, isn't that dangerous or expensive or very niche, be a friendly mythbuster, use analogies and make it real. You know, you're this ambassador for the sector, and you want to make sure you're leaving that really positive impression with them. So moving on to LinkedIn and social media. Hopefully most of you use LinkedIn as business people. And I'm sure a lot of you use Facebook and Twitter and TikTok and all the rest of it as well. And obviously there are quite distinct audiences across those. LinkedIn is very business to business, and the others are, you know, obviously more personal and, you know, different age groups as well across the different social media sites. So for using your LinkedIn platform. Plain English explainers like geothermal works 24/7, no sun, no wind needed, just heat beneath our feet. Some good examples of the type of format you can use as well. You could try listicle style posts. I know Anne's a fan of these. 5 things you didn't know about geothermal, or 4 myths busted and explained, or what I do in geothermal and why I love it. And don't forget to show behind the scenes. If you work in the sector and you're doing really cool things behind the scenes, or you're visiting a plant, take some photographs of the fieldwork, of the testing, of the teams doing stuff. They'll humanise your story and your work. Keep the captions that you use clear and engaging, and above all, just real. But also make sure that whatever you're sharing, you be comfortable if your boss or your comms team sees it. So, you know, if you need to wear PPE, make sure that's on, or make sure you're not giving away any sensitive information into the public domain that might be useful to your competition, or give the game away too soon. And if you're not sure, check it first before, just to make your life a little bit easier. You can also build influence by commenting on other people's posts. So sharing thoughtful insights or helpful clarifications. Remember, visibility will build momentum. So the more you actually engage with social media, the more you're putting things out there, the more feedback you'll get, and it's self-perpetuating the way it moves. And while it's great to give a thumbs up and a like to a post for that boosted visibility, it's best practice to reshare the post with your own additional thoughts. So the way that LinkedIn's algorithm works, it favours original content and thoughtful engagement. So when you reshare a comment, put your thoughts in with it, because then you're actively contributing to the conversation, and the post is more likely to show up in your network's feeds. A like has very minimal reach in comparison. Remember to tag people and companies, and use hashtags as well, especially on LinkedIn. These are powerful tools to help increase that engagement and visibility. So when you tag, and I'm sure most of you know this, when you tag someone, a colleague, client, or a company, your post is more likely to appear in their network's feed. So that kind of little spread arms and wings, and that instantly increases the size of your audience. The tagging as well prompts people to engage. So if you know, like us, we've had posts going out about today. We've all been liking them and sharing them and engaging and commenting, and that again creates a sense of inclusion and can start more conversations and widen that network too. Acknowledging people publicly is also a great way to build goodwill. So whether it's celebrating someone's milestone or expertise, or thanking a partner, or spotlighting someone's contribution, it's good to show that recognition and appreciation just with a simple tag. And tagging a company or someone that's well respected within the industry can also associate your post with their brand or expertise. And again, that just builds your own brand and the trust and the relevance to your content. So it's all kind of growing and showing for that ultimate impact at the end of the day. There's been a kind of movement away slightly from using hashtags too much, although they do still work, but there's less of a, I think people don't use them quite as much as they used to, but they act like keywords. So people are following like hashtag renewable energy or hashtag geothermal, and they're more likely to see your posts even if they're outside your network. So there's still value in using them, but they're not as strong a pool as they used to be for that filter. And by consistently using them, it does help become part of that broader conversation and build your reputation in the field over time. So just thinking beyond socials very briefly, if you've got a passion for your work, then you want to share it wherever you're going. So it might be, you know, offering to speak at the school your kids go to, or the uni groups you're still part of, scouts groups that your kids go to, wherever you're going to find those curious minds, and bring visuals, tell the stories. Even if you're interested in policy, I'm sure this would be helpful for both. Help your council reps in your local areas and your MPs, get them to understand what it is that geothermal does. And you know, if there's examples in your neck of the woods, get them along, get them to see what it looks like firsthand, because that way it really brings it to life for them, and they'll get that kind of momentum and speed and passion as well. So final thoughts for me. You don't have to be a comms expert to be great at communicating. Just be human, be yourself, but be clear and be authentic. Start with why it matters, not how it works. Use stories, comparisons, and plain English. And remember, you are the best ambassador your sector has. People trust people they know. And every post talk, casual chat will help move that needle, even if it doesn't feel like it in the moment. So keep showing up, keep sharing what you do. Your passion really is contagious. Use it. Thank you.
That was fab. Thanks, Pam. I was busily writing notes. But no, thank you so much for sharing that sort of practical experience with us and something we can all do moving forward. Lastly, for the presentations, we'll move to Anne-Marie, and please take the floor.
Thanks, Lucy. Boel, I have signed up to the Declaration of Communications. I think it's an excellent document, and I would encourage everybody to go away and do so if you've got 2 minutes left at the end of our hour before you're back to work. Thanks everybody for joining us, and thank you to Wing for having me. It's great to see lots of gentlemen joining Wing as well on a Wednesday lunchtime, so welcome to you as well. Pam, you did a great job actually talking about communications and many of the sort of tips and tricks that we can employ and sort of add to our skill set. I guess I come at it from, well, I am a specialist in communications. I've worked in the communications industry for 30 years now. The last decade of which was very much at the coalface, no pun intended, but working for an onshore oil and gas company here in the UK. And I think what that has taught me, and I see that Polly's put an interesting question in the chat about shale, because we were a traditional oil, a conventional oil and gas company, but we were trying to develop unconventional shale in the UK. And that has taught me a huge amount about how to bring a difficult message to an inquiring and concerned public. And I think, you know, there are some of those issues with extractive industries. We tend to be a group of people that really understand the technical, and you know, we are very robust in our regulatory approach, in our health and safety approach. But when it comes to communicating that to non-technical people who quite often have, you know, an emotional feeling about a process or a development that we're undertaking, it's really important that we look at the other side of communication, and it's very much a two-way process. It's also about listening. It's also about having empathy and understanding why people don't necessarily endorse or understand something, or haven't really taken the time to get behind a topic. And perhaps give you a couple of examples. When we were engaging with the public about oil and gas, you know, some of the questions, we had these fantastic glossy brochures. We were all trained. We all had the sort of Q&A training. But when we got chatting to people, what they wanted to understand was, what did it look like? You know, one question I remember a lady asking me, she said, "Oh, that's an awful long way down for people to be going," because a lot of people's connections are, particularly in the UK, and you know, if there are others from different parts of the world on the call, it'd be interesting to hear your views too. But a lot of the connection for people in the UK historically has been with mining, with coal mining. And again, that's a very emotive and emotional issue politically, as well as for the public. But helping people to visualize, as Pam was saying, and giving them analogies is really important. You know, we are an industry, and I'm sure many of you have come potentially from the oil and gas industry and backgrounds that, you know, we like an acronym. We have an acronym for everything. And you know, it's taking that away and using very simple language and analogies. And I'll give you a good example. So for the last 4 years, the oil and gas company I work for, Star Energy, had moved into geothermal. We bought a small onshore geothermal business in the UK, and we were looking to develop geothermal. And one of the key off-takers we were targeting were NHS trusts. You know, big issue there for the NHS to decarbonise their heat within the hospitals. And so we were having conversations with a number of trusts. And they sort of said to us, okay, can you know, we were talking about acquiring 3D seismic, and then we were going to drill these doublets, these 2 wells. And they were sort of looking at us, and I said, okay, it's a little bit like this. Imagine microsurgery. Okay, so much like you would take an ultrasound to look at a person's knee or another part of their body to see what was happening beneath their skin, we conduct or undertake 3D seismic surveys so that we can look under the ground to see what's happening with the rock. And they were like, oh, right, okay. So that gives you a sort of visual footprint, if you like, of the subsurface, what happens under the ground. And then we said, yep, absolutely. And then the next point is, it's not a huge operation like a coal mine. It's actually very small. You know, the drill bits, 6 to 12 inches in diameter, and that's what your pipe work's going to look like. So it's a bit like your microsurgery in hospital, you know, going in to mend that meniscus on your knee or that hernia that you have. And that gave them a very clear and simple way to help them to understand what, and I'm not taking away, don't get me wrong, I'm not taking away anybody's technical skills, but it really helps non-technical people to understand the process and what we're trying to achieve. And I think that's very important in your communication. Again, Pam touched on understanding your audience, and I think that's very important, you know, who you're talking to and giving them a context, a bit like our friends at the NHS Trust. You know, are they a friend, and is it just a case of you talking to them about your work, you know, how you got into the industry and your passion for it? Or how does the narrative, how does what you're trying to say actually impact them? Does it make a difference to their life in a positive way? And it's helping to explain that to people. And very simply, it's about taking that message as widely as we can. And it's to Boel's point at the beginning. Geothermal is not a well understood industry. You know, we have a great example here in the UK. We have the Roman baths in Bath. You know, we have an amazing project down at the Eden project, which is an iconic location for many people in the UK, where they're using geothermal heat to heat the biomes, and a new plant nursery they have. So again, it's having those little touch points that people can visualize that brings it to life. And I think I'm going to end on it there. I have very happy to take questions. I wear the scars of having worked literally in the fracking industry. And as Polly has asked, you know, how do we remove some of that toxicity of that debate? And in defense of the industry, I think very early on, we lost control of our ability to talk to non-technical people, to talk to that emotion that people had about industry in their community. And I think the real advantage we've got with geothermal, with it being a clean technology, is that we can really make a tangible difference to people's lives. We can decarbonize heat at scale here in the UK using a technology that's proven, that is all over Europe, that is rapidly growing in America, and we have some fantastic examples that we can use. So let's come together under Boel's declaration and all work together to spread the message, and hopefully we can see a thriving, growing industry in the UK sooner rather than later. And thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much. I love the community-based resource that it is, and just emphasizing that it is about people and human connections, and that's something so special about geothermal. So yeah, that's absolutely relates to getting the messages across in a very human way. Could I ask everyone who's happy to turn on their cameras and things? We'll start off with a question for the panelists about, and Anne-Marie touched on it there, how do you handle difficult questions? And one of those questions is the fracking issue. Because for us as an industry, creating reservoirs is a direction that the industry is going and we want it to go. So how do you address difficult questions? And one of those questions being, is it fracking? Over to you, panel.
Shall I have a go at answering that one?
Yeah, of course.
I think for communities, I think you've got to kind of take different stakeholders in different buckets here. You know, if you are undertaking a project in a community, and Lucy, obviously, you know, that's something that you've worked very closely on. Yeah. I think you've really got to start communicating what you're trying to achieve with the local community at the earliest opportunity and bringing them on that journey with you. And I will use one word here that's absolutely critical, and that's trust. They need to be able to trust you as an operator, as a developer. They need to be able to trust the process that got you there. So that's, you know, the fact that you will have gone through a planning process with the local council. They need to be able to trust in the regulation that sits around it from the Environment Agency, and trust in the health and safety that you've put into that. And I think being very open and transparent with communities from the outset, before you've even thought about putting a drill bit in the ground, is very important. Because yes, there are plenty of facts that you can give people. You know, we can talk about Quake It Off, which was the terminology of Taylor Swift's Eras tour, which recorded a 2.3 seismic event. So, you know, we can contextualize it, but I would say it's absolutely critical to get local communities to trust you as a local developer.
Yeah, I hadn't heard Quake It Off. That's brilliant. But I absolutely agree with you about the trust thing. And I'm going to embarrass Peter Ledingham, who's on the call now. He was the project manager during the drilling of United Downs. And he led the whole communication thing based on trust. So if we had a neighbour that was upset or concerned about anything, Pete would literally go and have a cup of tea with them and work out what was wrong from that standpoint. So in terms of a baseline for geothermal development in the UK, we've got quite a high level of trust to start with. So that's just a little note there, because it was a brilliant example. Anne.
Yeah, you've been talking about at a very project specific level, and of course there's a whole load of work behind that, and huge respect to you, Peter, and to the others in the team who've been working on that. But I am finding, if we're talking at a kind of higher level, just introducing people to geothermal, a message that seems to ring home is much of Munich is heated geothermally, much of parts of Paris. There are geothermal projects all over Europe and all over the world, which have got through without causing any damage and without causing any problems. And then when people realise that you can drill in the centre of a town and you can have a geothermal project under a greenhouse or a hospital or something like that without it impacting, I think that in terms of high level messaging, I find that quite useful.
Okay, thank you. Pam.
Yeah, I was just going to add to that and say it's, you know, there's the whole strategies there, like Anne-Marie was saying, about the different stakeholders to engage with different messaging, but all coming back to that core. And using other examples of cities where it is safe and it has gone well is great. It's not really about rebranding geothermal, it's more about repositioning. And if you can use those evidence-backed examples and people are willing to speak to other people and, you know, cross-sell it, if you like, of how well it's gone and the benefits. That's what people want to hear about, especially in the community where they're worried about how it's going to impact their local spaces and their houses and the house prices and all of that stuff for the future. It's just coming back to really what are people's fears and what can you do ahead of time to allay them, and who can you get to actually be those ambassadors to help support that? You know, there's lots of people who are independent, that you can pull on the experts who can become those trusted people if you're starting from scratch, but also those that have lived through it, people that have, you know, like you say, live in the houses that are being heated by these projects, that are going to be able to fan the flame of positivity around the world about it. And it's just knowing where to look for those examples and ones that'll, you know, that'll stay with you. So when you are telling people about geothermal, that's what pops into your head. If they ask you something that's negative, you can counter that with a good example of how that's not the case. It's actually this, and it's based on that.
Yeah, thank you. I think, Boel, do you have anything to add, or should we open it up to the floor for questions?
I'd love to hear the questions from all of you. How nice it is, by the way, to see your faces. Hi.
Excellent. In that case, can you raise hands as participants? I'm guessing if you've got access to mic and camera, you can raise your hands. Give me a nod. Okay, Stuart, was that a question or was that an example? Okay, so please raise your hand if you have a question. Admiral.
Yeah, could I add, not just questions, but you guys are all working in the field, you're experiencing this, you've been doing this for many, many years. We'd love to hear what's worked, what hasn't worked, examples, and thank you for providing some links already. But yeah, love to hear from you as well as the experts on the ground.
Thank you. Good point. Susan.
Hi, Lucy.
Hey.
It's sharing an example which really shocked me. I'm lucky enough to do work with some European universities. And a couple of years ago, I was over in TU Delft in the Department of Energy and Engineering. And we were being, you know, the head of department was in there, various professors, and we were being presented on the various projects they got there on renewables, which included a demonstration hydrogen town they have on site and a demonstration geothermal project, which is very high profile in the Netherlands. And the chief scientist for the university professor, highly educated for hydrogen, did her presentation. And I was sitting there as a non-chemist thinking, God, hydrogen's really dangerous. But, you know, she's the expert and, you know, they've got this on site and, you know, assume they know what they're doing. And then that was over with. And then the geothermal project was presented upon. And when the professor had finished, he opened it up for questions. And the hydrogen professor immediately said, I do not understand why anything so dangerous is being allowed to happen on campus. And you know, TU Delft had their own outreach for, you know, the citizens of The Hague and, you know, went door to door and discussed impact, etc. But I think, you know, we talk about communicating with the public, but maybe we should be aware of within, you know, the technical community. If you're out or outside of your comfort zone, you can be really concerned about the risk of something you don't understand. That was a real eye-opener for me.
That's an amazing point. And how powerful is that
Yeah.
as well, coming
Yeah.
from a fellow professor? I mean, that
Yeah.
has influence.
Yeah, exactly. So, you know, education has to be at every single level.
Great. Thank you for sharing that. Simran.
Hi everyone. So I had a question that is something that I still struggle with is when people who are maybe interested in investing in geothermal, they often say it's too risky or they think about the risk, and that always sort of stops me in my tracks because then suddenly I have to, you know, explain things technically, and then I'm like, well, in some ways it is risky, but how do I move it back onto the positives? And yeah, it's something of a hurdle, of a stumbling block that kind of like quiets the conversation, and I want to know how I can maybe move past it.
That's a fantastic question. How do we communicate the risk? Who's up?
I'll go first. Why don't I go first? I think, yes, I mean, all extractive industry, all energy, there is an element of risk, but I think it is about scale. You know, there is a point about scale there. I mean, if does it, Simran, does it tend to be about their view on capital risk, or is it about geological risk? Because they're sort of obviously two slightly different things, or is it that they don't want to risk the capital because they're concerned about the geological?
I think it's a bit of both. So like I'll give you an example. Like I recently did a presentation on shallow geothermal energy, and just one of the feedback points, or one of the sort of like comments that I heard afterwards, was someone thinking that it was just not feasible to dig up the ground, even though we do it in many different projects. So yeah, it's just maybe it was the audience that I had was more technical rather than the public having different issues. But I think even within the technical professionals, engineers, they still have these types of questions.
I mean, obviously data is a way of de-risking, the geological. We do have some data here in the UK, but clearly, we need to be able to drill some more wells. We have got, obviously, the BGS have got a lot of data, but we do need to drill some wells to help de-risk that, which is, what the industry is trying to do in the UK. And maybe you can add to that, and I'm sure Peter will. I see he's got his hand up.
Peter is first.
Hi, everyone. I think it's very difficult to talk about risk in one pigeonhole because there are different risks for different people, and the way to address them has to be, as people have said already, has to be tailored to what their concerns are. Capital risk and is clearly something that investors are worried about, along with technical risk, and there's no way really to deal with that without getting quite technical about your description of what's going on with them. For the public, and specifically, I think this is very geographically constrained, because if you just got 50 people in a room and explain geothermal to them, most of them will go, well, that's a good idea. Why don't we do that? It sounds great. Why wouldn't you? For the few hundred people that live near the drilling site that you're proposing, that doesn't really matter anymore. And fears, and it's then not about capital risk or about technical risk, it's about the fracking issues, the earthquakes, the noise disturbance, the traffic. It's things that affect their daily lives, particularly if you can't answer the question directly to them, well, what's in it for us? You're going to put this power project or whatever it is 100 yards from my house. What's in it for me? Because the honest answer is nothing, really. So all those things have to be addressed very differently, and negative fears are much more powerful. The negative is much more powerful than the positive. However much somebody near your drilling site likes the idea of geothermal, the whole NIMBY thing is a very real thing, and people are bothered about how it will impact their lives. So I think how to address those is very much down to the individual cases and the individual projects and the individual concerns that people have, some of which will be perfectly rational and some of which aren't, frankly, but that doesn't matter whether they're rational or not. Then they would only be irrational because people have an incomplete understanding of what it is you're trying to do. And it's your job to make them understand and hopefully allay their fears. Waffling a bit, sorry. I'm just saying it's not a very straightforward answer to how do you deal with the risk question.
Thank you, Pete. And Anne, do you have an answer with a focus on the investor stakeholder group?
Thinking about the investors, yes, of course, it depends. I mean, risk is a huge term, and as Peter said, we don't know exactly what the risk is. But first of all, again, back to my point, other countries have managed to deal with this for the investors. Investors have invested in geothermal, and also the insurance community is a very strong support for geothermal, and there are insurance products in place. And just let you know, we're already working with the insurance community here in the UK to see if we can bring some of those products over. So depending what risk it is, some of the risks are insurable.
Great, thank you. Pam?
I was just going to add from a comms perspective, preparation's key. So looking at who the different stakeholders are, what is their current perception and where do you want them to be? And then creating those key messages that are going to resonate with them to bring them from one to the other so they understand, and making sure that those messages are backed by evidence and fact so that you can substantiate them, because the media will be one of your stakeholder groups as well, particularly. But you'll have your investors, your community, the local people that are against it, local people that are for it, all those kind of different groups, and they'll all have different risk, sort of fears, and different challenges. And it's what is it, you know, what different tactics can you use to help that? So for government, for example, it might be that you need an economic impact report to support the real benefit that it's going to have to the local community, but also to the country. And some of that messaging can be brought in for your local community. It's going to create jobs. It's going to provide cheaper power. All of that good sort of advantages of having that on their doorsteps. It's really kind of just understanding who your audiences are and having that fleshed out beforehand, so you've got it ready, so that when you do get asked those difficult questions, you've got that as a reference to go back to and make sure that everyone's aligned within the organisation and across the sector. It's the sort of thing where, you know, it'd be good to have that mapped out for everybody, so that everyone does have that same song sheet to sing back to and use a reference point if it doesn't already exist.
That's great. It sounds like such a simple solution in terms of having a comm strategy pre-engagement, but it's so overlooked and it's really important.
Yeah. We've had quite a few different projects recently, from battery storage development to hydrogen projects and onshore wind as well. And it's kind of, you know, you have to bring everyone along with you on that journey. You can't leave and just hope that nobody's going to come up and say, oh, actually, we're totally fine with it. You're going to all be plain sailing. There will be problems. There will be groups of people that are massively opposed to it, and they might not actually really be that passionate about being opposed to it. But there's like, you know, there are certain groups who are like that, who will follow around projects because they like to oppose things that are the status quo. So it's just, you know, how prepared can you be? And it's, you know, just getting everything worked out, bringing lots of different people to those conversations as well across your organisation, because it's not just the CEO or the comms person that's going to have the background and the insight. The people who are on, you know, that are talking to the people in the community and they're talking to the clients in the supply chain, they'll all have different perspectives as well to bring in. It's good to kind of have that cross section of people involved to make sure that you've thought of as much as you can.
In fact, Pam, the comms person is the worst person to go and speak, because they're the person that's the most prepped, right? So actually you want, you know, it depends which audience you're talking to, but generally if you're talking to communities, they want to talk to the people who are actually going to be doing the developing.
Thank you. Well.
Thank you. I wanted to answer you, Simran, and I think Peter also mentioned this before. When we do get difficult questions about risk, and I mean, of course, it's very, very different situations, talking to communities, talking to investors. And for the investors, I would say if there's no risk, there's no upside either. So sure, we should answer their questions. We should be truthful with both investors and community citizens and community people, but we shouldn't get stuck. That's a trap, getting stuck in the negative side, becoming defensive. That's really a trap, and it's a signal that we are too small. We should talk more about the opportunity, because that's something that for sure the investors don't want to miss out on.
I like that. That's a strong message. Talk about the opportunity. And you're right, it is easy to get defensive, because it's when you're having a lot of questions thrown at you, and there are risks, there are geological risks, there are capital risks, and it's important not to focus on those. Okay, I think we have time for one more question. Anybody? Well, in that case, I'll take the opportunity to say thank you so much to all of our panelists. We really do appreciate your time, and it was a fantastic discussion, but also to everybody who turned up on a half term. And it's amazing that we've had so many people attend this webinar, and thank you all for your input. And do you want to let them know about the handout that will go around afterwards?
Yes, I've been making notes on that. So we've started a list of some of the great assets around, and some links to news about geothermal and all different kinds of things that you can get involved in immediately. We'll send that out at the end of the meeting, but this is just a starter, and I know lots of people will have lots of ideas and lots of links that we can join, that we can add to this list. So you'll get that, and we've told you in the list how you can get in touch with your new information. So we'll do an update of that and we'll send it out as well. But also we've started working on a kind of toolbox, and it's almost been mentioned by various people around. FAQs, interesting stories, case studies and things like that. And I'm planning with a group of people, planning kind of hackathon style thing to get people's input to see if we could make a bit of as I said, toolbox that we can share across the industry. So I'd love you to get in touch. There's details on the handout that Lucy's going to send out after this meeting. Yeah, let's just start pooling our resources very simply, in a very simple way that we can share with people, so that we can start to be more effective, I suppose, in our external comms, as we've been saying. But thanks very much. Thanks for the great discussion. Good to see everybody here.
Bye. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ini, I've seen your comment. You said you would love to take part in this, so I hope